6 months ago, I moved into Oakwood Terraces, hopping for peace and quiet. The neighborhood seemed perfect: tall oak trees lining the streets, manicured lawns stretching in front of colonial-style homes, and a community that appeared welcoming at first glance. What the realtor conveniently forgot to mention was that this suburban paradise operated under the iron fist of an overbearing homeowners association, led by a woman who insisted everyone call her Madam President to her face, but whom everyone called Karen behind her back. I am not the confrontational type. I keep to myself and focus on my work. Speaking of which, I should explain that I am a contractor for a local police task force. Nothing glamorous or dangerous. I mainly assist with surveillance equipment transport and occasionally help monitor certain locations. The job requires discretion and reliability, which is why they assign me a government-plated Jeep Cherokee. It is not flashy, just standard issue black with tinted windows and government plates. I take pride in maintaining it properly. The HOA rules about parking were explicitly clear. No commercial vehicles could be parked in driveways overnight. No cars could block the main thoroughfare. Guest parking needed proper permits displayed. I studied these rules carefully to avoid any issues. After careful consideration, I found a perfectly legal curbside space near the end of our cul-de-sac. It was unassigned, away from any homes, and did not block any access points. I began parking there regularly, always ensuring the Jeep was clean and properly secured with both the factory alarm and a heavy-duty steering wheel lock. My daily routine became predictable. I would leave early, return in the evening, park in my spot, and walk the short distance to my house. Some days I carried equipment cases, other days just my lunch cooler. I always nodded politely to any neighbors I passed, though few returned the gesture with any warmth. There was a tension in this neighborhood that I could not quite place. That tension had a name, and that name was Elizabeth Harrington, Karen, as everyone whispered. She lived in the largest house on the street, white columns framing her doorway like a miniature White House. I first noticed her watching me about 2 weeks after I moved in. She stood at her window, curtains slightly pulled aside, eyes tracking my movement from Jeep to house with undisguised disapproval. "Excuse me," she called out one evening as I was unloading some equipment. Her voice was honey-coated but carried an edge sharp enough to cut glass. "That vehicle looks rather utilitarian for our neighborhood." She gestured toward my Jeep while maintaining perfect posture in her pressed pantsuit. "We have standards here about unsightly vehicles." I explained that it was government-issued and assured her it was parked according to HOA regulations. I even offered to show her the rule book. Her smile tightened, eyes narrowing slightly as she declined. "Just keeping an eye on our property values," she said before turning away, heels clicking sharply against the sidewalk. That was the first interaction, and I foolishly thought it would be the last. I continued my routine, being especially careful to keep everything by the book. But I could feel her eyes on me. The weight of her disapproval hung in the air. One afternoon, I caught her standing near my parking spot, clipboard in hand, furiously scribbling notes while glaring at the government plates. Our eyes met briefly. She did not look away or appear embarrassed at being caught. Instead, she smiled, the kind of smile that does not reach the eyes, and continued writing. In that moment, standing on my quiet suburban street with the setting sun casting long shadows across manicured lawns, I felt something shift. The calm was only surface deep. Something was brewing, and I was about to become the center of a storm I never asked for. The first violation notice appeared on my front door 3 days later. It was printed on official HOA letterhead, citing my Jeep as a potential community hazard due to non-conforming appearance standards. I read it twice, trying to understand what rule I had violated. The notice referenced Section 8, paragraph 12 of the community bylaws, which I immediately looked up. It stated only that vehicles must maintain appearance standards consistent with community aesthetic values. The vagueness was clearly intentional. I drafted a polite response, attaching photographs showing my clean, properly parked vehicle and citing the specific exceptions for government vehicles in Section 10. I hand-delivered it to the HOA office and requested a formal review. The secretary took my envelope with a sympathetic glance that suggested I was not the first to challenge Karen's interpretations of the rules. The second notice arrived the next day. This one claimed my Jeep was improperly registered with the HOA office, despite the fact that I had submitted all required paperwork during my move-in. The third notice, which appeared 48 hours later, stated that suspicious vehicles with government identification require special board approval, a rule that simply did not exist in any documentation I could find. The monthly HOA meeting could not come soon enough. I arrived early, notepad in hand, prepared to address these unfounded claims professionally. The community room filled quickly with neighbors I barely recognized. Some avoided eye contact while others whispered behind raised hands. Karen entered last, dressed immaculately in a blue blazer with gold buttons, her blonde bob not daring to move out of place as she took her position at the head table. "Item 4 on tonight's agenda," she announced after dispensing with preliminary matters, "community safety concerns regarding unauthorized vehicles." She did not mention me by name, but her eyes flicked to where I sat. "We have reports of a suspicious black vehicle with government plates frequently parking in our community. It has been observed coming and going at irregular hours, sometimes carrying unmarked cases and equipment." The room filled with concerned murmurs. Karen continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial tone. "We have reached out to local authorities who cannot confirm what agency this vehicle belongs to. I move that we authorize immediate removal of any vehicle that cannot provide proper documentation of its purpose in our community." I raised my hand, waiting to be acknowledged. Karen pretended not to see me until another board member pointed in my direction. I stood and introduced myself calmly. "The vehicle in question belongs to me. It is assigned to me through my contract work with a local police task force. I have all the documentation here, including my credentials and—" "Credentials can be falsified," Karen interrupted, voice sharp. "We have children in this neighborhood. We cannot have unknown individuals conducting surveillance here." The way she emphasized surveillance made it sound sinister, dangerous. "I am not conducting surveillance in the neighborhood," I clarified. "I transport equipment to designated locations for official police operations. My Jeep is parked legally according to all written HOA rules." "The board will be the judge of that," Karen replied dismissively. "Now moving to item 5. Just like that, I was silenced. My concerns brushed aside like insignificant dust. As I left the meeting, I noticed neighbors giving me a wide berth. Karen had successfully painted me as some kind of threat, a mysterious outsider with unknown intentions. The friendly wave from the woman across the street stopped. The man who used to nod hello now hurried his children inside when he saw me approach. The isolation grew palpable. I began documenting everything, photographing my Jeep's position daily, recording conversations, saving every notice. Something told me this paper trail would matter someday. Karen's campaign escalated with each passing day. I found my trash cans mysteriously tipped over. Anonymous complaints were filed about noise disturbances from my property during times I was not even home. Then came the formal letter, certified mail with the HOA seal. It stated in no uncertain terms, Unauthorized and improperly parked vehicles are subject to immediate removal at owner's expense. You have 48 hours to relocate your vehicle or provide comprehensive documentation of its purpose and necessity. The letter was signed not just by Karen, but by the entire board, evidence of how completely she had swayed them. I contacted my supervisor at the task force, explaining the situation. He seemed concerned but distracted by ongoing operations. "Just park it elsewhere for now," he suggested. "We cannot afford complications with the surveillance equipment." That night, I stood at my window watching Karen stroll past my house, slowing deliberately as she passed my Jeep. She took a photo with her phone, then continued walking, satisfaction evident in every step. I felt a quiet fury building inside me, not just anger but determination. This was my home, too, and I would not be bullied out of it by someone drunk on the petty power of an HOA presidency. The morning fog hung heavy over the neighborhood, painting everything in a ghostly gray hue. I yawned, shuffling to my kitchen window while waiting for my coffee to brew. My routine morning glance toward my parking spot froze me mid-stretch. The spot was empty. My Jeep was gone. Panic surged through me. Had it been towed already? The HOA's deadline was not until tomorrow. I grabbed my phone and pulled up the GPS tracking app I had installed after the first threatening notice. The signal showed the Jeep still within the neighborhood boundaries, just 300 feet from my current location. That made no sense. If it had been officially towed, it would be miles away at the impound lot. I threw on a jacket over my pajamas and ran outside barefoot, ignoring the cold dew soaking my feet as I sprinted down the street, following the GPS signal. When I turned the corner, I stopped dead in my tracks. There sat my Jeep, parked prominently in Karen's circular driveway as if it belonged there. The steering wheel lock I had carefully attached each night lay on the ground beside it, cut clean through. The driver's side door showed fresh scratches around the lock, and from where I stood, I could see the glove compartment hanging open, its contents spilled across the passenger seat. My surveillance equipment cases were stacked neatly beside the vehicle on Karen's pristine driveway. Classified police documents and sensitive electronics now sat exposed in broad daylight. Cold fear replaced my initial shock. This was not just harassment anymore. This was criminal tampering with police property. The front door of Karen's colonial swung open. She stepped out wearing a silk bathrobe, coffee mug in hand, that same self-satisfied smile fixed firmly in place. "Good morning," she called, voice dripping with false pleasantry. "Looking for something?" "What have you done?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice level. "You broke into and relocated a government vehicle. Do you understand how serious this is?" Karen sipped her coffee calmly. "Abandoned vehicles are subject to removal according to HOA Bylaw 15.7. I simply expedited the process since you clearly ignored our notices." "It was not abandoned. It was legally parked on a public street. You cut through a security lock and tampered with official police equipment." I pulled out my phone. "I need to call this in immediately." "Oh, please," Karen scoffed, waving her hand dismissively. "Government vehicle, police equipment. We all know that is just a story you made up. No real government agent would live in a neighborhood like this or drive such a basic vehicle." She gestured toward my Jeep contemptuously. "I was well within my rights as HOA president to investigate an abandoned vehicle that neighbors have complained about repeatedly." My hands trembled slightly as I dialed my police contact. I explained the situation in short, precise sentences, making sure to emphasize that sensitive equipment had been accessed by an unauthorized civilian. Throughout my call, Karen maintained her smug expression, occasionally rolling her eyes or shaking her head as if indulging a child's tantrum. "They will be here shortly," I said after ending the call. "I suggest you do not touch anything else." "Oh, I am terrified," Karen mocked, placing her coffee mug on the hood of my Jeep. "Your little friends playing dress-up as officers will not scare me. I know the chief of police personally. We play golf together at the country club." 20 minutes of tense silence followed. Karen retreated to her porch swing, pointedly ignoring me while scrolling through her phone. I remained standing beside my violated vehicle, documenting the damage with my camera. When the unmarked police cruiser turned onto our street, followed by 2 standard patrol cars, Karen stood up, smoothing her robe and fixing her hair. Her confident smile faltered, however, when Detective Sergeant Reynolds stepped out of the lead vehicle. I had worked with Reynolds on several operations. He headed the very task force that contracted my services. He took one look at the scene, the cut lock, the damaged door, the exposed equipment, and his expression hardened. "Ma'am," he addressed Karen directly, "did you authorize the tampering with this vehicle?" "I removed an abandoned vehicle that was lowering our property values and causing concern among residents," Karen replied, chin lifted defiantly. "As HOA president, I have the authority." "This is a specially equipped surveillance vehicle assigned to an active police operation," Reynolds interrupted, his voice carrying the full weight of his authority. "The equipment inside is classified. Tampering with it constitutes interference with a police investigation and possible destruction of government property." Karen's face drained of color. Her eyes darted between Reynolds, the uniformed officers now surrounding my Jeep, and me. For the first time since I had known her, Karen Harrington was speechless. The investigation at Karen's house lasted over 2 hours. Officers photographed the damage, documented the broken lock, and carefully repackaged the exposed equipment. Detective Reynolds pulled me aside while 2 officers took Karen's statement. "This is serious," he said quietly. "How long has this harassment been going on?" I showed him my phone, the cataloged notices, recorded HOA meetings, and dated photographs. His expression grew grimmer with each swipe. "The task force has to assess if any operations were compromised. Until then, we need to impound the Jeep as evidence. You will be temporarily suspended from contractor duties while we sort this out." My heart sank. The job was my primary income, but I did nothing wrong. "Policy, not punishment," Reynolds assured me. "We will get this straightened out." As the officers prepared to leave, Karen emerged from her house fully dressed in a power suit, her composure regained. She approached another detective, speaking animatedly, occasionally pointing in my direction. When the police finally departed, taking my Jeep with them, Karen strode over to where I stood on the sidewalk. "This is not over," she hissed, voice low enough that only I could hear. "You have made a serious mistake trying to intimidate me with your hired actors. The real police will be hearing about this." I stared at her in disbelief. "Those were actual police officers. You broke into a government vehicle." She laughed, a sharp, dismissive sound. "We both know what game you are playing. I have friends in high places. By this time tomorrow, your little charade will be exposed." True to her word, Karen launched her counterattack before nightfall. An emergency HOA email blast went out to all residents. "Community security alert. Potential impersonation of government official." The message detailed how investigation by actual authorities had revealed that certain vehicles with questionable government identification might be operated by individuals falsely claiming law enforcement connections. The email never named me directly, but included a description of my house and general parking location. The following morning, I discovered bright red paint splashed across my garage door. The word fraud dripped in ugly crimson letters. My mailbox had been bent completely in half, the metal twisted beyond repair. When I checked my security camera footage, it showed 3 teenage boys, sons of HOA board members, committing the vandalism while a car idled nearby. I could not see the driver, but I could guess. At the police station, I filed reports about the vandalism and continued harassment. The desk sergeant took my statement but warned me that without clear evidence linking Karen to the teens, there was little they could do. Neighborhood disputes are complicated, he said apologetically. We can document the damage, but proving who orchestrated it is different. Returning home, I found a formal complaint notice taped to my door. Karen had filed a police report against me, claiming I had engaged in threatening behavior and impersonation of federal officials to intimidate a civilian. The complaint included statements from 2 board members who claimed they had witnessed me acting erratically and making veiled threats. My suspension from task force duties stretched into its 4th day with no resolution in sight. I called Reynolds for an update and caught him between meetings. "We are building a case," he said cryptically. "Just hold tight, document everything, but do not confront her." That evening, a small act of kindness broke through the isolation. My neighbor Tom, an elderly man who rarely participated in HOA matters, shuffled over while I was assessing the paint damage on my garage. "I saw what happened," he said quietly, looking nervously toward Karen's house. "Those boys should be ashamed, and her too, for putting them up to it." "You saw her involved?" I asked, hope rising. Tom shook his head. "Not directly, but I overheard her on the phone saying something about teaching a lesson yesterday afternoon. She does this, you know, you are not the first." He patted my shoulder before retreating. "Just wanted you to know not everyone believes her stories." That night, I sat at my kitchen table reviewing my options. My income was temporarily halted. My reputation in the neighborhood was destroyed. My property was vandalized. Yet something Reynolds had said kept repeating in my mind. "We are building a case." Not just about my situation, but something larger. As if my problem was just one piece of a bigger puzzle they had been assembling. I decided to trust the process. I reinforced my home security, installing additional cameras and motion sensors. I backed up all documentation to secure cloud storage. And I waited, watching Karen strut around the neighborhood with renewed confidence, believing she had successfully neutralized the threat I posed to her authority. She had no idea what was coming. 7 days into my suspension, Detective Reynolds called me. "Can you meet at the station? Bring all your documentation." His tone was urgently professional. Something had shifted. The police station conference room contained not just Reynolds, but 3 other officers I recognized from various task force operations. A digital projector displayed photographs of Karen, not just recent ones, but dating back several years. Some showed her arguing with various neighbors. Others captured her inspecting vehicles with her ever-present clipboard. "Elizabeth Harrington has been on our radar for a while," Reynolds explained, gesturing to the timeline on the wall. "Your situation finally gives us cause to act. She has a pattern of property tampering, harassment, and false police reports. We have received complaints before, but witnesses always back out, afraid of neighborhood retaliation." Another detective, Garcia, nodded. "We believe she has been using her HOA position to intimidate residents for years, but breaking into a police vehicle crosses a line we cannot ignore." Reynolds leaned forward. "We want to set up a sting operation, using your Jeep as bait." The plan they outlined was elegant in its simplicity. I would be reinstated as a contractor with limited duties. My Jeep would be returned, repaired, and equipped with enhanced security features, including hidden cameras and a silent alarm system that would alert nearby officers. We would park it in its usual spot, appearing to resume normal operations. "We believe she will try something again," Garcia explained. "Narcissists like Karen cannot stand being challenged. She needs to prove her power by eliminating what she perceives as a threat." We chose the annual HOA summer barbecue as our moment. The event would draw most residents to the clubhouse grounds, creating plenty of witnesses, but also providing cover for officers to blend in. I would attend briefly, making sure Karen saw me, then leave ostensibly for work, parking my Jeep in its usual spot on the way out. The day arrived with perfect summer weather. I dressed casually, trying to appear normal despite my racing heart. The clubhouse lawn was decorated with balloons and streamers. Children played on the inflatable slide while adults clustered around the grill and bar areas. Karen presided over it all like a queen at court, wearing a designer sundress and directing volunteers with imperious gestures. Our eyes met briefly as I entered. Her smile never faltered, but her gaze hardened. I nodded politely and made my way to the food table, making sure to engage in visible conversation with a few neighbors who had remained neutral during the conflict. After 30 minutes, I checked my watch conspicuously and made my exit, driving slowly past the clubhouse to my usual parking spot. From there, I walked 2 blocks to where Reynolds waited in an unmarked car. The monitors inside showed multiple angles of my Jeep from hidden cameras. 2 other officers in plainclothes lounged nearby on a neighbor's porch. Tom had agreed to help, providing his front yard as a surveillance post. "Now we wait," Reynolds said, handing me a bottle of water. The wait was shorter than expected. Barely an hour into the barbecue, Karen excused herself from the festivities. The cameras tracked her walking purposefully down the street, wine glass still in hand as cover. She paused by my Jeep, glancing around to ensure no one was watching. She tried the door handle first, finding it locked. Then she circled to the back, attempting to peer through the tinted windows. What happened next occurred with startling speed. Karen produced a slim gym tool from her purse. Clearly, she had come prepared, with practiced movements suggesting this was not her first car break-in. She slid it between the window and door frame. "That is our cue," Reynolds said into his radio. "Move in." The officers converged from multiple directions, appearing so suddenly that Karen had no chance to flee. Her face registered shock, then outrage as they identified themselves. The wine glass shattered on the pavement as they secured her hands behind her back, reading her rights clearly for the cameras and audio recorders. From our vantage point in the surveillance car, I watched the Queen of Oakwood Terraces being escorted into a police cruiser, her perfect composure finally shattered. Neighbors emerged from the barbecue, drawn by the commotion. They gathered in small clusters, whispering behind hands as Karen, still protesting loudly about her rights and connections, disappeared into the back seat of the patrol car. "Got her," Reynolds said with quiet satisfaction. "Breaking and entering, attempted theft of government property, interference with police equipment, false police reports. We have enough to ensure she faces real consequences this time." As the crowd grew, I remained hidden in the surveillance vehicle, watching my neighborhood transform before my eyes. The reign of terror was ending, and I had played a key role in making it happen. News travels at the speed of light in small communities. By evening, Every resident of Oakwood Terraces knew that their HOA president had been arrested trying to break into a police vehicle. By morning, the story had expanded to include details of her previous harassment campaigns against other residents. By afternoon, the emergency HOA board meeting had been scheduled. I received a formal letter of apology from the HOA vice president, along with reinstatement of all my community privileges. The vandalism damage to my garage and mailbox would be covered by the association's insurance. Most importantly, I was invited to speak at the emergency meeting to clarify any misunderstandings regarding your residence and occupation. The community center had never been so packed. Chairs spilled out into the hallway as neighbors crowded in, many standing against walls or sitting cross-legged on the floor. The remaining board members looked shell-shocked, their usual confidence replaced by nervous glances and hushed conversations. Vice President Davis called the meeting to order with visible discomfort. As many of you know, we face an unprecedented situation. Our board president, Elizabeth Harrington, has been arrested on multiple charges related to property crimes and filing false reports. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Davis continued, "In light of these events, we have invited a resident who was particularly targeted by Ms. Harrington's actions to address us." Walking to the podium felt surreal. Faces that had avoided my gaze for months now looked up with curiosity or embarrassment. I kept my comments brief and factual, explaining my role with the police task force, the legitimate purpose of my vehicle, and the escalating harassment I had documented. I never wanted trouble, I concluded. I just wanted to live peacefully and do my job. What happened is unfortunate, but perhaps we can use this moment to create a more transparent and fair community governance system. As I stepped away from the microphone, something unexpected happened. Applause broke out, scattered at first, then building to a respectful ovation. People were standing, not just clapping, but nodding in agreement. Then the floodgates opened. One by one, residents came forward to share their own experiences with Karen's reign of terror. The young mother who had been fined repeatedly for having a stroller on her porch. The retired teacher whose garden gnomes were confiscated as unapproved decorative elements. The immigrant family who received constant citations about cooking odors whenever they prepared traditional meals. The meeting evolved into a cathartic community reckoning. Someone suggested reviewing all fines issued during Karen's presidency. Another proposed new bylaws requiring recorded votes on all violations. By the time the session concluded 3 hours later, the HOA had voted unanimously to remove Karen from the board permanently and to establish a committee to revise governance procedures. Outside the community center, neighbors who had previously shunned me now approached with outstretched hands and apologetic smiles. "We should have questioned her more," said one woman who lived across the street. "She made everything sound so official, and we were afraid of becoming her next target. The way she twisted everything made us actually believe you might be dangerous," admitted another. "I am so sorry we did not stand up sooner." The local news picked up the story 2 days later. They did not name me specifically, but described a resident contractor working with police who had been subjected to systematic harassment culminating in property crimes. Body camera footage from the arrest showed Karen struggling and shouting about her rights and connections. Her claims that she was just inspecting suspicious vehicles as part of HOA duties fell apart when officers recovered the Slim Jim tool and 3 different lock-picking devices from her purse. Online community forums exploded with "Karen, memes featuring her perfectly coiffed hair and outraged expression. Former residents of neighborhoods she had previously controlled came forward with similar stories. A pattern emerged of moving from community to community, always seeking HOA leadership positions, always using those positions to intimidate and control. Reynolds called to update me on the case progression. She is going to face charges, he confirmed. No connections or country club memberships can help her now. We have everything on video, plus your documentation and statements from multiple witnesses. For the first time in months, I slept soundly that night. My Jeep was returned to me, fully repaired and secured with new locks. The red paint was professionally removed from my garage door, and most importantly, the weight of constant vigilance had lifted from my shoulders. I could finally begin to feel at home in the neighborhood I had chosen. 3 months have passed since Karen's arrest. The seasons have changed, bringing cooler air and turning the oak trees lining our street into a canopy of gold and crimson. Much has changed in Oakwood Terraces beyond just the foliage. The HOA has been completely restructured. Instead of a single president with sweeping powers, we now have a 5-person council with rotating monthly leadership. All violation notices require photographic evidence and majority approval before being issued. Fines can be appealed through a transparent review process. Community decisions are made through open voting, not closed-door sessions. I was asked to serve on the council, but declined. Instead, I offered to help draft the new bylaws, focusing particularly on clear, unambiguous language that cannot be twisted for personal vendettas. My experience in documenting evidence for police work proved unexpectedly valuable in this task. Karen's legal troubles mounted quickly after her arrest. The district attorney discovered this was not her first brush with the law. She had similar incidents in 2 previous communities, but had managed to have the records sealed through connections and expensive lawyers. This time, the evidence was too overwhelming. She ultimately accepted a plea deal: probation, community service, and mandatory counseling, plus restitution to those whose property she had damaged. Her reputation, however, suffered irreparable harm. The videos went viral on neighborhood watch forums across the country. Her real estate business collapsed as clients withdrew listings. Her social circle evaporated overnight. No country club connections could salvage what her own actions had destroyed. Last week, a moving truck appeared outside her colonial mansion. Karen supervised the loading from her driveway, sunglasses hiding her eyes, posture still rigid with pride despite everything. Few neighbors came to say goodbye. Those who noticed her departure simply watched silently from windows or continued their yard work without acknowledging her existence. The fallen queen left without ceremony. Her reign concluded not with respectful farewells, but with collective relief. A for sale sign now stands in front of her empty house. The irony is not lost on me. The woman who built her identity around protecting property values ultimately became the neighborhood's largest liability. Prospective buyers tour the house regularly. I have heard families with children showing interest in the spacious backyard where Karen once held court. As for me, I have been fully reinstated with the task force. My supervisor even commended my handling of the situation, noting that my documentation practices helped build an airtight case. The Jeep sits in my driveway now. The HOA Council unanimously approved an exception for government vehicles, rendering my curbside parking spot unnecessary. I have reclaimed my home in other ways, too. The bent mailbox has been replaced with a sturdier model. I planted flower beds along my walkway, something I had hesitated to do before, fearing they would somehow violate some vague aesthetic standard. This weekend, I am hosting a small neighborhood barbecue. Nothing fancy, just burgers and casual conversation with neighbors who have become actual friends. Tom, the elderly neighbor who first showed me kindness during the darkest days, sits on my porch most evenings. We share beers and stories as the sun sets. You know, he told me recently, this neighborhood has not felt this peaceful in years. People are gardening again, putting out decorations, letting their kids play freely. All that fear is gone. He is right. There is a lightness here now, a sense of community rebuilding itself on healthier foundations. Children ride bikes past my house, parents wave from across the street, and genuine smiles have replaced the tight-lipped nods of before. The greatest lesson I have taken from this ordeal is how easily power corrupts in small places. HOAs are not inherently problematic. They can protect communities and maintain shared spaces. But without transparency and accountability, they become perfect vehicles for petty tyrants. One person's unchecked authority can poison an entire community. The second lesson is that standing firm against bullies eventually pays off. Had I moved my Jeep or left the neighborhood after the first confrontation, Karen would still be reigning over Oakwood terraces, making others miserable with her clipboard and arbitrary rules. Sometimes justice requires patience and documentation rather than dramatic confrontation. As I water my new garden in the golden evening light, I look across at the empty house where Karen once watched me with suspicious eyes. The windows are dark now, the curtains removed, the perfectly manicured hedges already showing signs of natural growth patterns. Nature reclaims what control freaks abandon. The best revenge was never about seeing Karen humiliated or punished. The true victory was in reclaiming our community, restoring normal life, and creating a neighborhood where rules exist to support residents rather than control them. The greatest revenge of all was simply living well, without fear, in the home I had chosen for myself. And that revenge grows sweeter with each passing day of freedom.